For about 2 decades now, Nintendo has set a standard of reinventing with every new generation. The jump from GameCube to Wii barely moved the needle in terms of graphical horsepower, but it completely changed the way we interacted with games. The Wii U, while not a commercial success, pushed lag-free streaming technology to a level that had never been done before and that Sony still hasn't quite managed to catch up to. Finally, the Switch allowed us to untether our home console gaming and bridge the divide between the dedicated handheld and the home entertainment system. In fact, it spawned a new generation of handheld PCs that, for the first time in their long history, are actually catching on. The Switch changed the landscape of video games for far more than just Nintendo. Its follow-up, however, is exactly what no one expected, in that it's exactly what you'd expect. The Switch 2 looks to be the most straightforward successor a Nintendo home console has had since we made the transition from the Nintendo 64 to the GameCube. And to be clear, this isn't a bad thing. Like I said, the Switch altered the landscape, and iterating on it rather than starting over makes perfect sense. And that isn't to say it won't have any of that patented Nintendo weirdness either. It's got Joy-Con that are mice, maybe this extra button that the internet is obsessing over for some reason, and probably some other little tricks up its sleeve that we don't know about. But at a basic level, the Switch 2 is pretty much exactly what you'd imagine from a Switch 2. It's a Switch with more horsepower. It's what the PS5 is to the PS4, or the Xbox Series X is to the Xbox One. An updated model with better specs and some nice new features. But now, here's the interesting part. We haven't seen Nintendo sell a tech upgrade like this in more than 20 years. We've seen them launch new systems, sure, usually with a launch title that catches fan interest, but we haven't seen them sell a graphical upgrade. The Wii was about selling motion controls in Wii Sports, the Wii U was about selling asymmetric multiplayer in Nintendo Land, and the Switch, well, the Switch was about selling you all those Wii U games you didn't play. But that's exactly what the point of the Switch was, take your console games portable, so just selling Breath of the Wild as a handheld game was enough. Launch titles like these are essentially tech demos. They're something you can see demoing in a store or in an advertisement and understand why you would want this new system. And that isn't exclusive to weird Nintendo-style systems either. For PS5, it was Astro's Playroom. Back on the Xbox One, it was Rise, Son of Rome. On GameCube, it was Rogue Squadron 2 and Wave Race Blue Storm, games that both had easy comparison points to the prior hardware, showing you just what a graphical leap it was. The game doesn't necessarily even need to be that good, it just needs to show you what you couldn't do on your old system. Obviously, the Switch 2 will need one of these games, something that clearly illustrates an experience that the previous Switch can't deliver. The only Switch 2 game we really know about so far is Mario Kart 10, 9, Tour 2, whatever they go with, and I'm sure this game will be great, but it sort of looks a lot like the last Mario Kart, which is 11 years old. It looks like it would run on the base model Switch, and honestly, it might. Like, they could very well release this on the original Switch in addition to the Switch 2. I'm expecting a decent cross-gen period for these systems given backwards compatibility and the insane install base for the original Switch. But the point is, unless the next trailer for this game just blows our minds, this isn't our technical showpiece. Another rumor from which we've seen a lot of smoke is an even more HD release of Breath of the Wild, but once again, that's literally a game that already exists on Switch. Sure, it may run at 1080p now instead of 900p, but that isn't going to be transformative, even with some upscaling to maybe 1440p or so. Could Pokemon Legends ZA turn out to be a Switch 2 title? I don't think it's likely, but even if it is, pinning your technical showpiece hopes on the Pokemon Company is a bold plan. But there's another problem when it comes to this technical showpiece title on Switch 2, and that is Metroid Prime 4. Metroid Prime Remastered is the best looking game on the Nintendo Switch. I will happily die on this hill. When the trailer for Metroid Prime 4 came out, I had to argue with the internet to convince them that it was in fact possible that it was running on the original Switch. What we've seen looks absolutely gorgeous, and that's a problem. This, to me, looks a whole lot more technically impressive than Mario Kart or Breath of the Wild running at a higher resolution. And in theory, Metroid Prime 4 is coming out this year. I'm expecting Switch 2 to be out in June. Whether Prime 4 comes out before that or later in the year, Mark my words, it will be put up against every Switch 2 launch release with an annoying influencer claiming that this Switch 1 game looks better than anything on the Switch 2. Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a marketing problem for the Switch 2, regardless of how well Metroid Prime 4 actually sells. Far more people will talk about this game and use it for clicks than will actually buy it. The obvious follow-up then is, what if Retro releases a separate Switch 2 version of Prime 4 with better graphics? Well, here's the problem with that. Metroid Prime 4 isn't going to sell an incredible number of copies. It's a Metroid game. Metroid Prime 4 hitting, say, 3 million copies, the current record for the Metroid series, would be a monumental achievement. So Nintendo isn't going to want to spend the money to make a bespoke Switch 2 version when the Switch version will play on Switch 2 just fine. It's possible the Switch 2 may have some sort of upgrade system where you can put in a Switch 1 game, then download an update for a Switch 2 version. But if that's the case, the best I'd really expect is an update to resolution, not a graphical overhaul that's actually going to show the technical differences. Nintendo needs a studio that can put out a game that can be stacked up against Metroid Prime 4 and come out the clear winner in terms of visual fidelity and features. It can't even be a fight, this game needs to just trounce on Metroid Prime 4. But their list of studios that I'd consider capable of doing that on new hardware and time for launch isn't particularly lengthy. Retro themselves are of course busy. Monolith would likely be my next pick, but they have a Xenoblade X remaster releasing in March, and I doubt they'd want to put out a second Xenoblade game this year. It is possible that a team from Monolith is working on a separate, smaller title, but I also think that title is probably the very Breath of the Wild remaster we mentioned earlier. You've got the 3D Mario team, of course, and they may be able to pull it off, but my bet is actually elsewhere. I'm pulling for Next Level Games. Their last game was Mario Strikers Battle League in 2022. That remaster of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was outsourced to Tantalus. But Next Level Games is quietly one of the most technologically competent teams Nintendo has, with Luigi's Mansion 3 being, in my opinion, really the only other game Nintendo has produced on Switch that can hold a candle to Prime Remastered, and by extension, Prime 4. Since Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon in 2013, Next Level Games have had a roughly 3-year gap between each of their products. Metroid Prime Federation Force in 2016, Luigi's Mansion 3 in 2019, and Mario Strikers Battle League in 2022. Everything would point to a release in 2025 for their next game, perfect for the launch of the Switch 2. The question, of course, is, what is it? Another Luigi's Mansion? Some other classic series? Or an entirely new IP? That remains to be seen, but let me know your guesses down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a like and subscribing to Nintendo World Report TV. You can find a whole lot more from us at NintendoWorldReport.com, and you can chat with us about this or anything else Nintendo related in our Discord using the link in the description. My name's John Reardon, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.